April 20th, 1985. Ridgefield, New Jersey. 9-year-old Anna Carpenter knocked on her neighbor's door, holding 2 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. It was supposed to be her last stop before dinner. Hours later, her mother found only a small, mud-stained Girl Scout badge near the back fence, the last trace of her daughter ever seen. Searchlights swept through fields and rivers. Hundreds of volunteers combed the woods. But Anna was gone. Without a scream, without a witness, without a single clue. Weeks became months. Her picture faded on missing posters. And Ridgefield, once the safest town in Bergen County, learned what it meant to live with fear. 2 decades later, a single strand of hair pulled from an old evidence bag would reopen the case and expose a truth far darker than anyone could imagine. What really happened to Anna Carpenter on that quiet spring afternoon in 1985? And why did the trail lead back to the man everyone thought they could trust? Before we dive into this haunting story, tell us where you're watching from and how safe your town feels tonight. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications, because some stories never truly end. Ridgefield, New Jersey, April 20th, 1985. The kind of spring afternoon that belonged in a postcard. Warm golden sunlight washed over neat rows of houses, the gentle sway of newly budding trees, and the unmistakable chorus of children's laughter as they darted across front yards and chalk-covered driveways. On Maple Drive, the heart of the neighborhood, there was a familiar feeling of peace, as if nothing bad could ever touch this place. It was the sort of day when windows were open, neighbors waved from across fences, and the scent of fresh-cut grass carried on the breeze. Among the children, 9-year-old Anna Carpenter stood out, her brown curls bouncing with every step as she skipped along the sidewalk. She wore her brand-new Girl Scout uniform with pride, the sash perfectly straight, each badge meticulously pinned. Anna clutched 2 boxes of Thin Mints against her chest, careful not to let them tumble as she made her way toward the end of the street. She hummed a song under her breath, a tune she'd picked up from her mom, her mind racing with the excitement of selling cookies all by herself. It was a small adventure, but for Anna, it felt like the whole world. Her destination was number 47, an old Victorian house with faded blue shutters that had once been the prettiest on the block. The garden was a bit overgrown now, and the paint was starting to peel, but Anna thought it still looked like something out of a storybook. That house belonged to Mr. Richard Malden, the high school chemistry teacher, a man most folks in Ridgefield knew by sight, but not by story. He lived alone since his mother had passed away 2 years before, and though he always had a polite smile or a nod for anyone who passed, he rarely stopped to talk. As Anna approached the door, her shoes crunching softly on the gravel, a dog barked a few yards away, and a bike bell rang out in the distance. The quiet was interrupted just enough to make her heart flutter with a nervous thrill. She straightened her sash, tucked a stray curl behind her ear, and knocked. What happened next would become a defining moment for the entire neighborhood. Later, some neighbors would recall seeing Richard Malden open his door, stoop slightly to smile at Anna, and gently invite her inside. It all seemed so ordinary, so harmless. No one watching from their window or working in their garden thought twice about it. In Ridgefield, this was the kind of place where trust came as naturally as breathing. But trust is fragile, and beneath the calm, sometimes shadows linger. As the afternoon wore on, the sunlight slid behind gathering clouds, and a hush seemed to settle over Maple Drive. Children began to drift home, their games forgotten as the promise of dinner beckoned. Anna's laughter, so bright and unmistakable, faded with the daylight. Inside number 47, silence pressed against the windows. Somewhere, a clock chimed 5, its sound swallowed by the thick walls of the old Victorian. The world outside carried on as usual, but for Anna Carpenter, time had shifted. Her mother, Linda, stood at the kitchen sink, glancing at the clock and thinking it was almost time to call her daughter in. On the other side of town, the routine hum of life continued. Families gathering for Saturday dinners, televisions flickering to life, the easy comfort of a safe suburb in spring. But at the edge of that comfort, a story was beginning that would ripple far beyond Ridgefield. That evening, as darkness crept over the white fences and tidy lawns, Anna did not return home. And the question, so simple and so haunting, would echo long after the sun set. What really happened that afternoon on Maple Drive? The nightmare had begun quietly, on what should have been an ordinary day. Long before the headlines and the searchlights, Ridgefield was simply home. A small, unassuming town cradled in the safe heart of New Jersey. The kind of place where change came slowly and strangers felt welcome, where families settled in for generations, and the streets carried the memory of countless childhoods. For the Carpenters, Ridgefield was supposed to be a new beginning. Anna Carpenter had always been a light in her family's world. She moved through life with a curious mind and an infectious energy that filled every room she entered. Friends and teachers noticed her first by her laughter, bright and clear, then by her kindness, always the first to help a classmate or make a new kid feel at ease. She was the sort of child who left hand-drawn cards on neighbors' doorsteps and sang along to the radio without a hint of embarrassment. Her mother, Linda, often said Anna was her little sunbeam, a spirit too big for any storm. Linda Carpenter, a nurse at Bergen County Hospital, had grown used to juggling night shifts and early mornings. Her husband's death 3 years earlier left a hole in the family, one she tried to fill with love and steadfast resolve. The move to Ridgefield, just 6 months before Anna's disappearance, was supposed to bring peace. Along with Anna was Evan, her 14-year-old brother, who spent his afternoons shooting hoops at the park and his evenings tucked away with comic books. Evan pretended he didn't have time for his little sister's games, but he always looked for her in the crowd at school assemblies, and he never forgot to set an extra plate at the dinner table. The Carpenter home stood on a leafy corner, windows bright with paper flowers Anna had crafted herself. Their lives wove seamlessly into the fabric of Ridgefield, a community where people still watched out for each other, where back doors were left unlocked, and kids played unsupervised until sunset streaked the sky pink and orange. Ridgefield's streets were lined with white fences and old trees that arched overhead, dappling the pavement with shifting patches of sunlight. In spring, the whole town smelled of lilacs and cut grass. On weekends, neighbors mingled at the farmers' market or gathered for potlucks at the local church. Among the familiar faces, Richard Malden was an outlier, a man more defined by his silences than his words. At 41 T'Tausu, he'd taught chemistry at Ridgefield High for over a decade, his lessons meticulous, his standards strict. Students described him as quiet but fair. Some remembered the odd way he always locked his classroom door, or the faint chemical tang that clung to his clothes, but most thought little of it. Since his mother's death, Malden kept to himself, his world shrinking to the boundaries of his crumbling Victorian at the end of Maple Drive. He was unfailingly polite, offering a wave to anyone who passed, but conversation never lingered long. The mailbox filled up. The shutters faded. The garden wilded around the edges, as if the house itself was drawing inward. Still, in 1985, Ridgefield wore its innocence like a badge. Bad things happened in cities, not here. Parents traded stories of scraped knees and summer camp, not missing children or late-night police visits. If there was trouble, it belonged to some other place, some other time. But behind the familiar, danger sometimes slipped in unnoticed, hiding in plain sight, patient and silent. On Maple Drive, where Anna Carpenter's laughter had so often spilled into the street, an unease would soon grow, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore. For now, the town carried on, unworried, 1,000 small routines unfolding against the gentle backdrop of suburban safety. No one in Ridgefield could have imagined how quickly their world would change, or how the memory of one bright little girl would forever alter the rhythm of their quiet town. On that ordinary Saturday, the Carpenters' home was filled with the quiet rhythms of family life. Linda stood at the kitchen counter, flipping through coupons and humming to the radio, while Evan sprawled on the living room floor, headphones on, lost in his own teenage universe. Afternoon sun filtered through the windows, casting golden patterns on the floorboards. It was a moment of peace, one that would be replayed in Linda's memory, over and over, for years to come. Around 4:10 p.m., Anna tugged at her mother's sleeve, clutching the cookie order sheet in her small hands. She asked if she could deliver 2 boxes of Thin Mints to Mr. Malden across the street. Linda looked at her daughter's earnest face, so determined and hopeful, and offered a tired smile. She gave her permission, reminding Anna to be home before dinner. Anna, always quick to promise, dashed off, her sash gleaming in the sunlight as she skipped down the driveway. From the window, Linda watched Anna cross the quiet street and approach the big blue-shuttered house. There was nothing unusual in the moment, just a trusted neighbor, a familiar routine, the easy safety of suburbia. Linda returned to her chores, not knowing she had just witnessed her daughter's last steps. Time ticked by. The clock on the kitchen wall seemed to grow louder with each passing minute. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, Linda glanced out the window again. Anna should have been back by now. She called her daughter's name into the growing dusk, her voice rising with worry. No answer. Linda walked to the porch, searching the street for Anna's telltale bounce. At first, she tried to reason. Maybe Anna had stopped to play with a friend, or perhaps she'd decided to deliver another box of cookies on her way home. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, worry took root in Linda's chest, growing sharper with every unanswered call. She moved quickly from house to house, checking every porch and yard along the block. With each shake of a head or gentle, "No, haven't seen her," dread pressed in tighter. When she reached Malden's house, she hesitated, her hand trembling as she knocked. The door opened a crack, just wide enough to show Mr. Malden's face, pale and expressionless. He said Anna had already left, that he thought she'd gone home. His voice was flat, offering no comfort or clarity. Linda's heart pounded. She tried not to panic, but the streetlights flickered on and Anna was still nowhere to be found. Darkness fell over Ridgefield, and the safe cocoon of Maple Drive began to unravel. Linda called the police. Within an hour, squad cars arrived, red and blue lights slicing through the quiet night. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, faces drawn with fear and confusion. Volunteers formed search parties, flashlights bobbing through the backyards and fields behind the houses. The woods bordering the neighborhood were thick with undergrowth, shadows stretching long and deep as the search stretched late into the night. They called Anna's name into the darkness, but no laughter answered. No footsteps hurried back home. Near the back fence of Malden's yard, a police officer's flashlight caught a glint in the dirt. A small, bent Girl Scout badge, caked with mud and barely visible beneath the tangled grass. Linda recognized it instantly. Her knees buckled as she clutched it to her chest, the last tangible piece of her daughter she would hold for years. There was no blood, no footprints leading away, no neighbors who'd seen Anna leave the house. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, the piece of Ridgefield shattered in a single, inexplicable moment. By sunrise, fear had rooted itself deep in every home on Maple Drive. The questions swirled, unanswered and unbearable. Where was Anna? What had really happened behind the faded blue shutters of number 47? And would the town ever feel safe again? By dawn, news of Anna Carpenter's disappearance had swept across Ridgefield like a chill wind, reaching every doorstep and darkening every conversation. The once unshakable confidence in the safety of their neighborhood crumbled overnight. Before the sun even cleared the rooftops, the story made the front page of the local paper. 9-year-old Ridgefield girl missing after cookie sale. Her picture, a snapshot of Anna beaming in her Girl Scout sash, was printed in bold beneath the headline, her innocent smile echoing the hope and terror now gripping the entire town. Reporters arrived in vans, setting up cameras at the end of Maple Drive, their voices hushed but urgent as they recounted the details for the evening news. Microphones and notepads hovered as neighbors filed past, heads bowed, arms wrapped around themselves as if to keep out the cold, even in the warmth of April. For Ridgefield, used to stories about bake sales and Little League, the glare of national attention was both surreal and unsettling. What had been their quiet corner of the world was suddenly exposed. The peaceful facade peeled away to reveal a community in crisis. In the Carpenter household, sleep became a memory. Linda sat by the window each night, her eyes fixed on the empty driveway, a lamp burning behind her like a beacon. She barely ate, her hands trembling as she turned Anna's favorite necklace over and over between her fingers. Every creak of the floor, every car passing by, every stray bark of a dog outside made her heart leap with hope, only to crash again when Anna did not return. Evan, once so animated and loud, moved like a ghost through the halls, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He replayed that last afternoon in his mind, scouring it for something he could have done, some moment when he might have stopped Anna, or walked with her, or even just noticed her a little sooner. Guilt and helplessness gnawed at him, a shadow that wouldn't lift. Neighbors, shaken from their routines, gathered at the Carpenter house with casseroles and candles, but there was little comfort to offer. Soon, the support spilled into the streets. Night after night, they held vigils on front lawns, praying in trembling voices for Anna's safe return. Flyers bearing Anna's face, eyes bright, curls bouncing, were taped to telephone poles, pinned on bulletin boards at gas stations and grocery stores, fluttering in the spring wind as a reminder of what was lost. As days blurred into weeks and weeks faded into months, hope became a fragile thing, kept alive more by ritual than reason. Linda made it her mission to keep Anna's memory in the public eye. She called the police daily, pleading for updates, urging them to keep searching, refusing to let her daughter's story be forgotten. Her persistence became a symbol, both of maternal love and of the pain that would not heal. But for the rest of Ridgefield, something intangible had shifted. The freedom of childhood was suddenly suspect. Parents called their children in earlier, watched from porches as they played, and checked locks that had never seemed necessary before. There were whispers in the supermarket aisles and anxious glances exchanged at school pickup. Trust had been broken, and with it, the simple peace that once defined their community. Some neighbors whispered that Anna would return any day, while others, in voices barely above a whisper, began to fear the worst. Yet all of Ridgefield was united in their mourning and their fear, a whole town holding its breath, waiting for news that would never come. In the empty seat at the dinner table, in the faded chalk drawings on the sidewalk, Anna's absence was a wound that would not close. The illusion that nothing bad could happen here was gone, replaced by a question that haunted every quiet moment. If it could happen to Anna, could it happen to anyone? In the weeks after Anna's disappearance, Ridgefield found itself in the grip of both fear and speculation. The investigation began in earnest, every corner of the quiet town scrutinized by uniformed officers and men in plain clothes who didn't belong to the community but moved through it with determined purpose. For the first time in its history, Ridgefield was a crime scene, a place of unanswered questions and whispered suspicions. Detectives started with the obvious. The last person known to have seen Anna alive was Richard Malden, the high school chemistry teacher. His blue-shuttered Victorian, which had once faded quietly into the background of neighborhood life, now became the center of relentless focus. Police dogs combed through the backyard, noses to the damp earth, and picked up a faint scent that led them past Malden's overgrown garden and to the edge of the woods behind his house. There, the grass was trampled, the soil recently turned in odd patches that drew investigators' attention. Neighbors who had once described Malden as quiet and polite now recalled strange smells drifting from his basement windows, strong chemical odors that sometimes hung in the air on humid evenings. Others remembered seeing him digging in his yard at dusk, sweat glistening on his brow even as the sun disappeared behind the trees. The details, once dismissed as quirks, now seemed sinister in the glare of a missing child. Malden himself met the scrutiny with a chilling calm. He told police he had been cleaning his basement that afternoon, preparing for spring like so many others in Ridgefield. He insisted Anna had left soon after delivering the cookies, his story never wavering. His house was meticulously tidy, the basement floor recently scrubbed, shelves lined with labeled bottles and jars, remnants of a lifetime spent teaching chemistry. Investigators searched every room, but found nothing they could hold on to. There was no body, no blood, no clear evidence that Anna had ever been inside beyond the neighborly transaction at the front door. Still, suspicion lingered, dark and persistent. Forensic teams scoured the property, taking soil samples and collecting items that might prove useful one day. They bagged a muddy scrap of fabric found near the fence line, but the technology to analyze it would not exist for another 20 years. As days turned into weeks, the trail grew cold. Malden, once the odd but harmless neighbor, found himself shunned by the community. Whispers followed him in the supermarket aisles. Cars slowed when they passed his house, their drivers watching for anything out of place. Pressure built, but without proof, the case could not move forward. Malden hired an attorney and stopped answering questions, closing himself off from the world behind locked doors and drawn curtains. Within 3 months, he was gone. He packed his belongings into an old sedan and left Ridgefield in the middle of the night. The only witness his silent house and the wind that rustled through the wild garden he'd left behind. The investigation stalled. Anna's file was boxed up, marked with the cold, bureaucratic label, Missing Person Case number 85419, and placed on a shelf in the evidence room, alongside dozens of other unsolved mysteries. The town tried to move on. Schools reopened, soccer games resumed, and holiday parades wound their way down Main Street. But Anna's shadow lingered. Linda Carpenter refused to let her daughter's name fade. Every April 20th, she placed a bouquet of white flowers on Malden's front step and taped a photo of Anna, smiling and full of life, to the weathered door. Others learned to forget, but Linda could not. In her heart, the questions never left. Where had Anna gone? And how could a neighbor, a man she'd trusted with her child, disappear without leaving a single answer behind? The name Richard Malden became a specter in Ridgefield. Never spoken aloud, but never forgotten. It clung to every parent's worries and every child's nightmares, a reminder that some stories do not end, but linger, waiting for someone to look closer, to dig deeper, and to finally uncover the truth. Years slipped by, measured not in milestones, but in the quiet persistence of loss. Ridgefield changed in the way all towns do. Kids grew up, houses changed hands, new faces moved into old homes. But for those who had lived through Anna Carpenter's disappearance, the shadow lingered. The memory dulled but never faded. Her absence was stitched into the fabric of the town. A garden left untended, a Girl Scout troop missing one badge, a mother who kept her porch light burning long after hope had dimmed. 20 years after that spring afternoon, the world had changed in ways nobody could have imagined. In 2005, the Cold Case Unit of Bergen County reopened dozens of unsolved files, the shelves lined with evidence collected in an era before DNA had revolutionized police work. To the young detectives, the folders were relics: old Polaroids, yellowed notes, bagged bits of cloth and hair that had once held hope, now nearly forgotten. Detective Ray Hollins, just a few years into his career, took on Anna's case as part of a new review. Her story struck a chord with him. The innocence lost, the mother's refusal to let go, the eerie disappearance of Richard Malden. He sat late in the records room, tracing the names and details, imagining Ridgefield as it had once been. He noticed something most had missed: a plastic bag containing a fragment of blue floral fabric, caked with soil, and a single fine strand of hair, both found in the weeds behind Malden's old house. New technology brought new hope. The evidence was sent to the state lab for DNA analysis, a process that took months of waiting, an agony Linda Carpenter knew too well. Hollins kept her updated, promising nothing but determined to deliver what nobody else had. For Linda, it was a strange comfort to hear her daughter's name spoken with urgency after so many years of silence. Then, one autumn morning, the results came in. The DNA on the hair matched Richard Malden, unmistakable, even after 2 decades. At last, something concrete, something beyond suspicion or rumor. The sense of vindication was mingled with grief. The truth was finally within reach, yet justice still felt agonizingly far away. By this time, Malden was living in upstate New York, near Albany. He had faded into obscurity, his presence as unobtrusive as ever. No family, no close friends, just a small, weather-beaten cabin surrounded by dense woods. When the authorities arrived, it was too late. 3 days before, Malden had taken his own life. In the quiet dimness of his cabin, he had left a single sheet of paper on his desk. In his neat, careful handwriting, it read, "I kept her safe where no one could hurt her again." For Ridgefield, and especially for Linda Carpenter, the note was a cruel, ambiguous ending. There were answers, but no resolution. There was proof of guilt, but no confession, no remorse, no detail that could explain away the pain. The nightmares that had haunted the town now had a name and a face, but still no story to tie the beginning to the end. Police searched Malden's property, looking for any trace of Anna, anything that could bring peace or closure. For days, the woods around his cabin buzzed with activity. Searchers combed the ground, sifted through basements and crawl spaces, opened every door, every box. In the end, the final pieces of the puzzle remained just out of reach. Linda Carpenter attended every press conference, her presence a silent demand for remembrance. When asked what justice would look like, she answered only that she wanted the world to know her daughter's name, and to make sure no one would ever forget what Ridgefield had lost. But the truth, even in fragments, would soon prove even darker than anyone imagined. The story, like the wound it left, was far from over. With Richard Malden dead and the DNA match finally confirmed, many in Ridgefield wanted desperately to believe the ordeal was over. But justice, long denied, proved just out of reach, and closure, it turned out, was as elusive as ever. When investigators entered Malden's cabin near Albany, they were hoping for final answers. What they found, instead, would open old wounds and cast new, haunting questions over everything the town thought it knew. The property was small and cluttered, the signs of a solitary life, faded textbooks stacked along the walls, chemistry equipment left to gather dust, canned goods lined up with the same meticulous care that had once marked his teaching. In the basement, tucked behind a loose panel near the stairs, officers discovered a small, battered tin box secured with an old padlock. It was heavy, its contents shifting with a metallic rattle as they lifted it into the light. Breaking the lock, detectives braced themselves for grisly possibilities. Instead, the box held something at once more subtle and infinitely more disturbing. A stack of faded photographs, a child's necklace in a sealed envelope, and a torn scrap of blue floral fabric that exactly matched the pattern of the dress Anna had been wearing when she vanished. The photographs were the first shock. Some were old, yellowed by time, and all were blurry or taken from odd angles, as if shot in secret. Nearly everyone featured young girls in Girl Scout uniforms, smiling, posing, or walking up to unfamiliar doorsteps. Most were strangers to the investigators, but among them, two faces leapt out. Anna Carpenter, wide-eyed and joyful, and another girl, 10 years old, with sandy hair and an uncertain smile. The second child was identified as Kathy Levine, a girl who had vanished from a nearby town 2 years before Anna, her case similarly unresolved and her family left shattered by uncertainty. The necklace, delicate and tarnished, was not Anna's. A search through missing persons reports confirmed it had belonged to Kathy, a keepsake her mother described in heartbreaking detail. She'd given it to her daughter for her birthday, never imagining it would be found among the possessions of a man she'd never met. Detectives realized, with a sickening clarity, that Anna was not Malden's only victim. The implications settled like a weight over the entire investigation. How many girls had knocked on the wrong door? How long had Malden been living among them, a predator hiding in plain sight? The more they searched the box and its cryptic, chilling notes, the more they realized that the story was far from complete. Among the notes was a line written on the back of a receipt that read, April 20th, 1985, she knocked again. For Anna's family, this revelation was both shattering and surreal. The answers they had waited for so many years did not bring peace. Instead, they opened new, unthinkable fears. Linda Carpenter's grief took on a sharper edge. Her daughter's tragedy was no longer a singular horror, but part of a pattern, a wound inflicted again and again. Law enforcement pored over cold cases across northern New Jersey, looking for other missing girls, other unexplainable disappearances, and any trace that might tie Malden to a broader legacy of harm. But the farther they searched, the more uncertain the truth became. Many of the photographs could not be matched to names or reports. Some families had moved, some girls had grown up, and some faces remained forever unknown. Ridgefield, for a moment, became a symbol for every quiet town that had trusted too much. The case, already infamous, was no longer just about Anna Carpenter, but about every child whose life had intersected with evil, wearing the mask of normalcy. The twist left the community reeling. For every answer the box provided, a new and darker question emerged. As investigators traced the necklace, the fabric, and the blurred faces, it became clear that the full truth about Richard Malden and the pain he left behind might never be uncovered. The nightmare had grown larger than Ridgefield itself, casting a shadow that would haunt the region for years to come. The revelations from Malden's basement shook Ridgefield to its core. The town that had once prided itself on neighborly trust and quiet streets now found itself the focus of national headlines and hushed speculation. How many knocked on the wrong door, blared across newspapers and TV reports, the story echoing far beyond New Jersey's borders. Old case files were dusted off and reopened. In the wake of the new evidence, families of other missing girls, some who had long ago given up hope, others who had never stopped searching, stepped forward to compare their tragedies to the story of Anna Carpenter and Kathy Levine. The questions seemed endless and agonizing. How could a man live among them for so many years, hiding such darkness behind faded shutters and polite smiles? How many parents, thinking themselves cautious, had unknowingly sent their children past the door of a predator? Ridgefield, like so many American towns, had believed evil was something that lived far away, in distant cities or sensational headlines. Now they knew better. Now they understood that sometimes evil lives right next door. The mood of the community shifted. There was sorrow, but also anger, a deep sense of betrayal that rippled through block parties, PTA meetings, and church suppers. No one looked at their neighbors quite the same way. Children who once roamed freely now found their worlds tightly circumscribed, every outing supervised, every promise to be home before dark met with anxious reminders. People questioned their own memories, wondering if they'd ever noticed something off about Malden, or if they'd missed subtle warning signs that, in hindsight, seemed all too obvious. Linda Carpenter became the public face of the families left behind. She spoke at candlelight vigils and in news interviews, her hands shaking, but her voice unwavering. At the memorial service held 20 years after Anna's disappearance, she stood before the crowd, holding her daughter's photograph. Anna, forever 9, forever radiant in her Girl Scout sash. Her words were simple, but they resonated through every broken heart. I can't forgive, but I want the world to remember who Anna was. The audience wept openly, grief and fury mingling in equal measure. It was clear that the wounds inflicted by Malden's crimes would not heal with a single arrest, or even with his death. In response to the tragedy, the town came together to build Anna's Promise Garden, a small sanctuary planted with white daisies, the flower Anna had once called her favorite. At the center stood a bench ringed with handwritten notes from children, families, and neighbors. Each message was a prayer, a hope, a plea for the missing, the lost, and the never found. The garden became a place of solace and reflection, but also a constant reminder of the cost of innocence and the price of forgetting. Yet just as the town began to settle into a new, uneasy normal, the story took one last, unsettling turn. In 2019, a county clerk, sorting through boxes of old cold case files, discovered a dusty envelope misfiled and nearly forgotten. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, and deeply disturbing. It showed another little girl, her hair bright blonde, standing uncertainly on the steps of Malden's Ridgefield house. She was not Anna, she was not Kathy, and she remained, even now, unidentified. The photograph sent a fresh chill through Ridgefield and beyond. It was a stark reminder that the past is never truly buried, that every answer could lead to another question, and that there are stories that never really end. As the police re-examined old evidence and tried to trace the identity of the girl in the picture, the wound that had begun with Anna Carpenter's disappearance a generation earlier reopened, raw and aching. The community, forever changed, could only hold tight to each other and vow, this time, not to let any child's memory fade into silence. The story of Anna Carpenter haunted Ridgefield, but her tragedy was not just the tale of one lost child in one small town. As journalists and true crime authors dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling truth. Anna's disappearance bore heartbreaking similarities to a real-life case that had shocked New Jersey decades before, the story of Joan Angela D'Alessandro. In 1973, Joan was a bright-eyed 7-year-old Girl Scout from Hillsdale, a town not so different from Ridgefield. Like Anna, Joan set out one April afternoon to deliver cookies to a neighbor, a trusted adult, a high school science teacher named Joseph McGowan, who lived only 3 doors away. Joan never returned home. Her mother's calls into the dusk, the desperate search by police and neighbors, and the gut-wrenching fear that settled over the town all echoed the events that would later unfold in Ridgefield's own nightmare. But in Joan's case, the horror did not end with her disappearance. 5 days after she vanished, her small body was found in a wooded area near Stony Point, New York, far from home, her life stolen in a crime so senseless it reverberated across the nation. The trial revealed the dark truth that no one wanted to face. Her killer was the very neighbor her family had trusted. The heartbreak felt by the D'Alessandro family, the guilt and anger of a community that could not protect its own, would change New Jersey forever. Joan's legacy, however, did not fade into silence. Her mother, Rosemarie D'Alessandro, transformed her grief into action. For years, she fought for change, determined that no family would ever again face the same pain without justice. Her relentless advocacy led to the passage of Joan's Law in 1997, an act that ensured anyone convicted of murdering a child during a sexual offense would face life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was a small comfort in the face of unspeakable loss, but it sent a message to the entire country. Children must be protected, and the law would no longer offer second chances to the most dangerous offenders. For Ridgefield, learning about Joan's story brought both sorrow and solidarity. The 2 girls, separated by years and geography, became forever linked by their innocence and the terrible fate they shared. Their mothers, Linda and Rosemarie, corresponded through letters, exchanging words of comfort, encouragement, and the unique understanding that only comes from living with such loss. At Anna's Promise Garden, a plaque was placed in memory of both girls, their names side by side, a testament to lives cut short and the courage of families who refused to let them be forgotten. The community also learned valuable lessons from Joan's legacy. Town officials reviewed safety protocols for children. Schools implemented new rules for after-school activities, and local police established stronger networks with surrounding communities to quickly share information in the event of future emergencies. Parents in Ridgefield spoke openly with their children about trust, boundaries, and what to do if they ever felt unsafe. The old myth that evil could not touch a place like theirs was shattered, replaced by a hard-won awareness and a commitment to vigilance. Still, for all the reforms and resolutions, the wounds remained. The question, what if, lingered in every corner of Ridgefield, just as it had in Hillsdale so many years before. Yet there was a quiet hope that sharing these stories and honoring the real children behind them could offer comfort and maybe even prevent future tragedies. Joan's Law, the gardens, and the renewed resolve of families were all testaments that out of unthinkable loss, change and remembrance can grow. The real and fictional stories, intertwined, became a call to never forget and to keep fighting for a world where every child comes home. Today, the story of Anna Carpenter lingers in Ridgefield, woven into the town's identity, like the roots of an old tree, sometimes hidden, but never forgotten. Years have passed since the tragedy first shattered the calm of Maple Drive, but the memory remains vivid in the minds of those who lived through it, and in the legacy that Anna and other lost children have left behind. On every anniversary of Anna's disappearance, neighbors, families, and even strangers gather in Anna's promise garden. White daisies bloom there each spring, a living symbol of hope and innocence. Handwritten notes, many from children who never knew Anna, are tucked beneath the stones or tied to the low branches of the willow tree at the garden's center. Their words are simple and heartfelt. Come home soon. You are not forgotten. We will remember. Linda Carpenter, her hair streaked with gray now, still comes every year, laying a bouquet and tracing her fingers over her daughter's name on the plaque. Sometimes she speaks, her voice steady, telling the newest generation of children about Anna, not as a cautionary tale but as a bright, loving soul who deserved so much more. Ridgefield itself changed in ways large and small. Gone are the days when children roam the neighborhood unaccompanied, doors left unlocked and streets empty at sunset. There's an unspoken vigilance now. Parents wait on porches, eyes tracking every bicycle and skipping rope, a collective promise that no one will ever be as trusting or unprepared again. At school assemblies, teachers talk openly about safety, about the importance of speaking up and trusting instincts. The local police department partners with the Girl Scouts to provide educational programs, empowering young girls to be aware and assertive. Some lament the loss of innocence, but most recognize the wisdom in caution, the responsibility to protect. For Linda, for Evan, and for every family that's lived with loss, closure is complicated. There's peace in knowing the truth, but the wound never truly heals. Grief becomes part of the landscape, a gentle ache on quiet nights, a sharp pain on birthdays and holidays, a smile that never fades from old photographs. Yet, through their pain, the Carpenters have chosen remembrance over bitterness. Linda often reminds visitors to the garden that Anna's story is about more than tragedy. It's about community, she says. It's about the power of one child's light to change the world, even after she's gone. Beyond Ridgefield, the real-life story of Joan Angela D'Alessandro, whose courage and legacy inspired Anna's, continues to echo through New Jersey and the nation. Joan's Law stands as a legal shield for vulnerable children everywhere, a testament to the strength and determination of those who refuse to let her loss be in vain. In schools, law offices, and state capitals, her name is spoken with respect, a reminder that change is possible when voices unite for justice. The lessons from both stories resonate with parents, educators, and children alike. Never let children go out alone, even for a short walk. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Report unusual behavior, no matter how small. Silence protects no one. The world may move on, but memories endure. In the mothers who still grieve, in the families who remember, and in the communities determined never to let such a tragedy repeat. Anna's Promise Garden is more than a memorial. It's a vow. Each petal, each candle lit at dusk, is a call to awareness and action. There are wounds that only truth can heal, and stories that demand to be told. To remember Anna, Joan, and all the missing is to keep faith with every child and to work toward a future where the nightmare never begins. And so the people of Ridgefield and the world carry the memories forward. Because sometimes the stories that matter most are the ones that never truly end.